and welcome. My name is Adam Thompson. I'm a paramedic and an EMS educator, uh, online instructor, if you will, and I have a new lesson here on bundle branch blocks. If you'd like to stick around, it's going to be a two-part, really quick series. Just to give you some information, not only how to identify a bundle branch block on a 12 lead EKG, but what a bundle branch block really is. So stick with me, and we'll get through this. It's going to be really, really quick. So first thing I want to talk about is the QRS complex, because that's where we're going to get most of our information with these patients. Uh, is it wide? Is it narrow? Is it got a terminal positive wave or terminal negative wave? What does all that mean? So this is your QRS complex right here, and it is a depiction of ventricular depolarization. Hopefully we all kind of know that by now. And the thing that's important with this, is it wide? Is your QRS complex wide? We need to know that. So if this complex, for example, it begins right about here and ends right about here, each of these small boxes is 0.4 seconds or 40 milliseconds. And we want to make sure that our QRS complex is less than 0.12 seconds or 120 milliseconds. However you like to say it. Seconds, milliseconds, either way works. So looking at this QRS complex, it takes up about 2 boxes. If you add half of this one, okay, you got a full box here and then another half right here. Each small box, again, is 40 milliseconds. So that's about 80 milliseconds. So that would only be 0.8 seconds. So technically, that might be a little bit narrow. So narrow QRS complexes, not a really big deal for this discussion. Wide QRS complexes, that's what you're going to see a lot of. So if you see a wide QRS complex, that could really only be one thing. You have aberrant conduction. And that aberrant conduction could be a supraventricular rhythm, supraventricular, meaning above the ventricles, supraventricular rhythm, with a bundle branch block, or it could be a ventricular rhythm, ventricular arrhythmia. So we want to make sure it's not one of these before we start looking for this. Okay? Make sure it's not one of these. And what's the easiest way to do that? Look for P waves. Do we see P waves? P waves tell us it's probably this, especially if those P waves are with every QRS complex. Now, obviously, with ventricular arrhythmias, you can have P waves, but they don't really care where the QRS complex is, or they're behind it. So let's get into our discussion here and talk about these bundle branch blocks for a second. What are the bundle branches? You need to know what the bundle branches are. Well, there are major highways of conduction in the ventricles, okay? And I talk about them as highways because if you think about going to work, and taking the highway to get there, it's a lot faster to take the highway. It's very quick, okay? But the second that the highways close down and you have to get off and you have to take the back roads, you might be throwing out some superlatives out there because it's not too much fun. It's a lot slower. You got stop signs and red lights and whatnot, and it slows down your trip to work. Same thing happens here. If this right bundle branch, because this is your right side over here and this is your left side over here, this right bundle branch is a highway. But if you close it, now you have to take the back roads from this highway over here to get back over to this side. And it's going to be a lot slower than normal. So just to identify these, this is the right bundle branch, and this is the left bundle branch. Notice that the left bundle branch has 2 fascicles, and the right bundle branch only has 1 fascicle. Okay, and that's just because there's more myocardium. It kind of owns the electrical picture on the left side. So it's just important to know that these are your highways of conduction within your ventricles for now. This is normal conduction. I've stolen this image, so to speak. I've kind of hijacked it from Tom Bouthellet's EMS12lead.com blog, so I'll give him his due credit, EMS12lead.com. He had an image like this, and I just kind of created my own. So what you're seeing here is the normal axis. And what does that mean, normal axis? Well, your electrical axis is almost like your wave of depolarization. So once you hit the ventricles, because we're not talking about the atrial depolarization yet, once you've hit the ventricles, you normally depolarize in this fashion. You have the septal depolarization, then the apices, or I'm sorry, apex, you only have one, and then the lateral walls and high lateral wall. And if you average out all those different vectors, you get this mean or average vector right here, and that's your axis. You get that from your average vector. And if you were looking at lead 2, which has its positive electrode here and negative electrode up here, you would get good upright QRS complexes. Why? Because whenever you go towards a positive electrode, you get upright QRS complexes. When you go away from the positive electrode, you get negative QRS complexes. And then if you're perpendicular, you get biphasic QRS complexes. Don't worry about this one too much. We'll talk about that in another discussion on electrical axis determination. Or you can go, here's another plug, to EMS12lead.com, EMS12lead, can't fit it on there, but EMS12lead.com, and do the axis determination tutorial, and you'll learn all about this stuff right here. Or you can wait for mine on video. So here's an example of a bundle branch block. This would be a right bundle branch block, because this is our right bundle branch over on this side, and it's blocked. There's a stop sign there, okay? So what happens? Well, judging from the picture, you can kind of get an idea of which way the axis is going, or the mean vector, so you can get a picture or an idea of what you would see graphically on an EKG. So let's say if we were looking at V1, and I'm going to put V1 here for the sake of the image, and put its positive electrode, because it's essentially a unipolar lead V1. What's going to happen? Well, we're only concentrating on the QRS complex, so let's cut out the atria here, not pay too much attention to the atria. You're going to get the septal conduction here, so that might give us a nice little quick positive R wave first, and then you're going to get this conduction, because the highway over to the left side is still open. That's not closed for business. So you're going to get nice fast conduction of the left side, the left ventricle, and that's going to show up as negative because it's going away from V1. And then you're going to go back towards the right, but pretty slow. You're taking the back roads. So you're going from cell to cell to cell to cell back towards the right, and that's towards V1, so you're going to get a big, wide R wave. Because remember, whenever something takes longer, it's going to widen the wave. So if ventricular depolarization is taking longer, it's going to widen the QRS complex. So this ends up looking something like this, which is called an RSR prime. Okay, RSR prime. A lot of people know this to be bunny ears. See, I'll draw my little bunny ears. Okay, and that's what you typically could see in lead V1 with a right bundle branch block. All right, with a left bundle branch block, let's picture V1 again. V1, remember we're talking about ventricular depolarization. Essentially, you're going to get quick depolarization to the right. Let me use a different color. Quick depolarization to the right, and then slow depolarization back to the left. And it might look something like this. We're going towards V1 and then away. So towards, and then away. Okay, so it might look something like that in lead V1. So it would look essentially like that. Okay, so you'll notice something, that the last wave, when it's a left bundle branch block, is going away from V1, and when it's a right bundle branch block, the last wave is going towards V1. Interesting, the last wave of depolarization. So looking at these two different possibilities here, if we're looking at V1, first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify whether it's supraventricular or not. So either we have P waves with every QRS complex, or it's irregular, or we have some sort of understanding that it is a supraventricular rhythm. Okay, it's not ventricular. That's important. All right. So and then we look at these two different QRS complexes here in V1. So it's supraventricular and it's wide. It's greater than 0.12 seconds, or 3 small boxes. Okay, first thing, find the J point. Find the J point on those QRS complexes. The J point is the change in direction from the QRS complex to the ST segment, and I've circled them here for you to find. Okay, and draw a straight line back from that J point. And if you want to, you could shade them in, kind of helps. And then which way is your arrow pointing, your arrowhead, so to speak, or your triangle? Which way are they pointing? Well, the one on the left over here is pointing up, and then over here it's pointing down. And then I've got the easiest way to remember this for you. Think of your turn signal in your car. If you're turning to the right, you push up on your turn signal. And if you're turning to the left, you push down on your turn signal. Unless you're a jerk and you don't let anybody know. But for the rest of us that use our turn signals, when you push up on your turn signal, you're indicating that you're turning to the right. And when you push down, you're indicating that you're turning to the left. Okay? So that'll kind of help you remember which bundle branch block is which. Because if that last wave, we call this the terminal wave. The terminal wave of the QRS complex. If it's up, well, we knew that with a right bundle branch block, we were going back towards V1, lead V1, at the end of the polarization of the ventricles. And it's completely opposite with the left side. If that last wave is down, this terminal wave, then it's a left bundle branch block. So the way to remember, if you push up on your turn signal, you're turning to the right. If you push down on your turn signal, you're turning to the left. So that's how you identify a bundle branch block. You look at V1 after you've identified that it's wide and it's not ventricular. Ventricular, not. It's not from the ventricle, okay? But it's wide and it's supraventricular. You look at V1. If the last wave in V1, the terminal wave is down, it's a left bundle branch block, because if you push down on your turn signal, you're turning to the left. If it's up, it's a right bundle branch block. Okay? Why is that important? Well, most EMS agencies do not let you identify STEMI with a left bundle branch block, because with a left bundle branch block, you get ST elevation normally. Okay? With a right bundle branch block, you typically don't, because of something called T-wave discordance. And I'm going to tell you something, that there's more steps needed to truly identify what type of bundle branch block it is. For instance, you're going to have to look at more leads, but we're going to talk about that more in part 2. So come back for part 2, and we're going to finish up this bundle branch block discussion. For now, we just know the first method that's ever been taught in paramedic school as to how to identify bundle branch blocks. You just look at V1. But now you kind of have an understanding of why that's taught that way. So come on back, and we'll talk about part 2 in the future, whenever you come back to see it.